Okay, so in this section we are going to develop our actual tic-tac-toe game in Solidity and we'll run it on the Ethereum blockchain. Now I have opened Remix here on remix.ethereum.org, and I have created a new file here and named it tic-tac-toe.sol for Solidity. Now with every file that we have in Solidity, we start with the pragma line, and here we have Solidity 0.4.19, which is the latest version, and we start our contract tic-tac-toe, and inside here we are going to have our variables and we are going to have our functions. Now we have a couple of things that I want to talk about. Those are the board and the board size. Then we have a couple of events that are getting fired. Then we have two players, one that is the one who created the contract and the second one who is going to join. And obviously our game will cost some ether. Now let's get started and let's talk about the board size. The board size in a tic-tac-toe game is always free. Now let's give it a uint 8 is a board size, and that's 3 times 3, right? You have 3 rows and 3 columns, so that's tic-tac-toe. And then you also have a board, and our board will be an array 3 times 3, but instead of uint we are going to use addresses, because we are going to have someone start, for example, on the left top corner, and then the next one starts in the middle, and then the other one going back to the right top corner, and the next one starts on the top center, and so on. So we have an address, and here we have the board size, which unfortunately we can't use inside the size of the array here. So we have to define it directly before we compile the contract as a 3 times 3 address array, and here we have basically the board. Now then we also have 2 players, and that's address player 1 and address player 2. So now we have a board size which we can make public so everybody knows what is the board size, and an address 3 times 3 board. Now the board size, we will not need it right now. We will need it a little bit later to actually validate if there's a win or a draw or a loss, but the most important part is the board and the player 1 and the player 2. Now I also want to have, obviously in the constructor, I want to immediately set the player 1, which is the one who creates this game. And here we have the function tic-tac-toe, and that's a public function, obviously, because it's the constructor, and the player 1 is the message sender. Now I'm also going to make this public so I can question who is player 1 and who is player 2. And then I want to have another function called join the game. Join game, it's also public, and here the player 2 is the message sender. Now I have the constructor. The constructor can only be called once, and somebody can join the game, which is then the player 2. Now let's try this. Let's create the game, and I see that my player 1 is the one who started this transaction, and my player 2 is currently 0 because everything is initialized by default. And now I select my second account and I'm gonna join the game, and I see my player 2 is the second account and my player 1 is still the first account. Now we have basic functionality to start the contract and to join the game, but obviously we need some control structures. We need to make sure that the player who joins the game is not the player 1, it's a different one, and we also obviously want to set something on our board, which we are going to do in the next lecture.